House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was recently giving a press conference about the Build Back Better program. Now, unfortunately, it's not to report that there was good news about this. No, it's about how they're going to cut the bill. So, in a letter to House Democrats on Monday, Pelosi said that it is essential that difficult decisions must be made very soon, and that members have overwhelmingly said that they prefer to do fewer things well so that we can still have a transformative impact on families. So, of course, all that's Washington BS speak to, basically saying we're cutting stuff out of the bill. That's it. The centrists have won. The establishment has won. We're going to give them what they want. We're going to cut things that are important out of this bill, even though we could literally pass it immediately. We don't have to rely on Republicans. This is a reconciliation bill, but no, we're going to give them to corporate donors, as always. So now, the original Build Back Better outline included hundreds of billions of dollars for parent benefits, childcare, universal pre-K, housing, green infrastructure, the expansion of Medicare and Medicaid, negotiations with pharmaceutical companies between Medicare and the pharma industry to bring down prices, and I don't know what they're going to drop. I have my thoughts on that, but Pelosi suggested that the family policies would be a priority, and Democrats have always said that a continuation of the monthly child tax payments to parents, which are scheduled to stop after December, would be the cornerstone. So they're going to do the child care stuff, which is okay, it's good, but they're going to drop a lot of other stuff. Now, Pelosi defended her position during a Tuesday press conference, saying that we feel real bad. We're just not going to be able to get to $3.5 trillion. In fact, here's part of that.
We have some important decisions to make in the next few days so that we can proceed. I'm very disappointed that we're not going with the original $3.5 trillion, which was very transformative. But in the whatever we do, we'll make decisions that will continue to be transformative about women in the workplace. So transformed because of childcare and universal pre-K, which sort of go together, the child tax credit, home health care workers. Men benefit too, but largely women, and women are those caregivers as well. So not only to free up women to go into the workplace for their own professions and interest, but also to recognize the work that women do in providing that health care, issues that relate to family and medical leave and the rest. I'm pretty excited about the prospect that we have to make some difficult decisions, of course, because we have fewer resources, but nonetheless, no diminishing of our commitment to a transformative agenda for the children.
I'm excited at the prospect of making difficult decisions. What? Okay, did anyone understand what she was saying? The only thing that I understood is we're not getting $3.5 trillion because we're just not going to. Now, here's the thing. $3.5 trillion was a compromise. It was originally $6 trillion. Negotiated down to $3.5, and now being negotiated down further, and it's disastrous. Disastrous. So now, the question, of course, is why would you need to, since you don't need Republicans, the Republicans were always going to vote against this, you only need Democrats, and you have enough Democrats. Why can't we get this done? Why can't we get this done? It's your own bill. You can easily pass it. Oh, that's right, because they're negotiating not with themselves. Understand, this is a negotiation between progressives and the donors. Nancy Pelosi and the donors. And of course, the donors are going to generally get most, if not all, of what they want. And so the donors this time used, they picked from a rotating cast of villains. In this case, they got Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Both gigantic recipients of gigantic amounts of campaign cash or bribes, legalized bribes, in order to try to tank this bill, which they don't like because it actually has provisions that would help the American people and not corporations. So now, in that same press conference, Pelosi was also asked by a reporter about the messaging. Take a look at that.
Only about 10% of Americans describe themselves as knowing a lot of specific things that are in the reconciliation package, and that the majority don't know anything at all. So do you think you need to do a better job at messaging, and going forward, how do you sell this if ultimately you have to?
Well, I think you all could do a better job of selling it, to be very frank with you, because every time I come here, I go through the list. Family and medical leave, climate, the issues that are in there. And but it is true, it is hard to break through when you have such a comprehensive package. But as we narrow it down and put it out there, I think that it will. For example, one of the things in the bill is the continuation of the Biden tax credit, that is child tax credit, that is in the was in the rescue package. That has great appeal. Do people know where it springs from? No. But it is a vast bill. It has a lot in it, and we'll have to continue to make sure the public does. But whether they know it or not, they overwhelmingly support it.
Now, look, I'm not the only one who's noticed that the Speaker of the House is not great at speaking. That's ironic because that's literally her job. It's her title, Speaker of the House. But on her overall point here, okay, no, it's not the media's job to sell the Democrats' agenda. Are you kidding me? No, it's the job of the Democrats. I hate to say it, but James Carville, somebody who I do not have much love for, James Carville is making the same point. He's like, no, that's not the media's job to sell our agenda. That's our agenda. Why don't we sell it? Democrats, sell the agenda. Go out and tell people about it. That's not the media's job. The media has its own role in reporting and analysis, of course, right? But we're not supposed to play, cheerleader for your bill. That's your bill. That's literally your job. And in a way, she actually inadvertently basically exposed the media for caping for politicians and certain parties, which is disastrous. It means that we don't have a free and fair media. Think about it this way. Think about the scandal, right? Fox News during the Trump administration was essentially Republican state TV, okay? And openly pushed Trump's agenda. That's not what the media is supposed to do. For Democrats, for Republicans, for anybody, they're not supposed to push your agenda. You're supposed to push your agenda. You're supposed to go on the shows. You're supposed to do the messaging. That's literally your fucking job. Do your fucking job, Nancy, and go out and be the speaker. Oh, right, she can't because she can barely talk. She can barely make any sense. Why do we have a speaker that can't speak? That can't even fucking talk? This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And look, as far as my opinion goes, I like a lot of the stuff that's in the Build Back Better plan. Now, of course, I always think that we should go further. As progressives, we should always continue to push for more and for better plans, more universal plans, etc., right? And the American people, they agree with a lot of the stuff that's in the Build Back Better plan, okay? Now, the problem is, of course, the donors do not want what's in this plan. Now, notice how Pelosi it had focused on childcare. Now, look, childcare, good. Child tax credit, good. Now, they're going to keep all that stuff because that's kind of her pet. That's kind of her focus. And again, fine. That's great. That's going to be beneficial to a lot of people. But the problem is what they're going to drop. And I have a bad feeling that they're going to drop the stuff related to Medicare, okay? Especially allowing them to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. That's the biggest thing that I think they're going to drop. Now, that would be actually one of the most transformative and popular things that they could do, is lower the price of prescription drugs. 83% of the American people support allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drugs. Even when they're presented with both arguments, the pharmaceutical company argument that, it's gonna reduce, our ability to do research and development. The American people, when they're presented with that argument, are like, no, that's bullshit. Come on, we know you already have enough money You're literally one of the richest, wealthiest industries on the planet. You can afford to lower the price of drugs just a little bit. You can afford to let us, allow us to buy our insulin without going broke. So no, they're not buying that at all. And so it's incredibly popular, but, and it's been incredibly popular. Again, Trump talked about it. Biden talked about it. This has been actually one of the most important issues for voters in a lot of these past elections. And so, I mean, it's ridiculous, the fact that we can't get this done. And we know why we can't get it done, because the pharmaceutical industry buys off politicians from both sides. And that's it. That's the problem. The money from big pharma. So now, that aside, right? So we know we're going to drop, they're probably going to drop some of those things. And, some of those very, very important expansions that are going to help a lot of people, but will affect their donors, okay? But the other claim here, the claim from centrists, is that, well, we've got to, because it's too much. Oh, it's too much. $350 billion for the next 10 years is $3.5 trillion. We just can't afford that. We just can't afford it. Well, okay, it's bullshit. But progressives, they decided to say, okay, you know what? You're right. Okay, why don't we just make it, instead of for 10 years, for 6, and bring down that cost? You say you want to do $2.1 trillion. Okay, we'll play your game. Just do all the stuff, pass all the stuff that's in the bill already, but only make it for 6 years instead of 10. In fact, that's what Representative Pramila Jayapal is saying at a press conference on Tuesday. She told reporters that if we need to cut some of them back to a fewer number of years, we'd be willing to do that. Why is that? Because we are not going to pit childcare against climate change. We're not going to pit housing against paid leave. We're not going to pit seniors against young people. So again, the strategy makes sense, because overall, the bill will be technically cheaper because it's for less years. So you compare the cost down to $2.1 trillion pretty easily by just making it last 6 years, and then you got to reauthorize it. And of course, with these things that are incredibly popular, well, if you don't reauthorize it, there's going to be a lot of angry people. So, and that's the important thing. Once you get these programs into place and people like them, it makes them really difficult to get rid of. And that's what the corporate donors, that's what Republicans don't want to happen. They want to make sure that people don't get used to having cheaper prices for prescription drugs, don't have, 2 years of free community college, don't have childcare, don't have any of those nice things, housing assistance, etc., so they can save a few bucks. Because ultimately, these corporations do not want to pay more in taxes. So, but yes, if Joe Manchin on the cost, if he's so worried about cost, well, there you go. They've got it. You solved it. In fact, Jayapal told HuffPost last week, reducing the number of years that the benefits are funded, making sure it's funded as quickly as possible, and that the benefits are universal as possible, we think is critically important. Ro Khanna said pretty much the same thing. What I've heard overwhelmingly from the Progressive Caucus is that they want to make sure that we aren't cutting programs. Now, there's one exception to this that they said, and I don't mean by cutting programs, because again, they don't want to cut any programs, but reducing the length that the program happens. So now they were actually against doing that for climate change. They wanted that to be funded for the full 10 years. And Jayapal said that reducing the duration of those measures could make it difficult for energy markets to properly adjust to those changes. All right, so that makes sense. So, great, let's do that. Problem solved. If the cost is the problem, well, we've got the solution. Especially since Sinema and Manchin literally have not come out and said, we think this part is the problem. We don't like this policy. You should drop this policy. All Manchin was doing was, I just think it's too expensive. And Sinema does little cutesy games like, I'm in the Senate. I'm in the elevator. and then runs away literally from her constituents to go run marathons after hurting your foot or whatever. Just dodging people like Neo from the Matrix. Dodging her constituents, not answering phone calls, not holding town halls in over 3 years. I mean, we know what she's doing, okay? But again, they can't say what they're up against because everything that's in there is incredibly popular. And they would have to come out on the record and say, well, I'm against, hearing aids for people on Medicare. Well, you would get destroyed. And so they can't. They can't. Now, again, I mentioned that they're part of the rotating cast of villains, right? So the real reason, as I said before, that Pelosi is now coming out and saying we're willing to cut programs is because the donors. Now, the new Democrat coalition, which again is funded primarily by the Chamber of Commerce, different corporate donors, pharmaceutical companies, she says that the speaker aligns with their views on the reconciliation bill, which in their words is an extremely slimmed down bill that would extend some version of the expanded child tax credit, fund the Affordable Care Act premium subsidies, and pass provisions to address climate change, which means no Medicare expansion, no reduction in drug prices, no or very limited free college, some of the most transformative stuff that's in there, they don't want because it would take a tiny bit amount away from their donors. Those same donors that Pelosi, Manchin, Sinema, and the rest of the corporate Democrats work for. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.